everybody. Welcome to our very exciting panel, The Wonderful World of Shorts. I'm really excited to have this conversation with these filmmakers today. We will have three filmmakers here. One of our filmmakers is just getting off an airplane, and so he will be a little bit late, but he'll pop on as soon as he can. So I want to welcome Irina Argaut and Stacey Corcoran. Did I say your name right, Irina? Oh, I can't hear you. TJ, I don't hear Irina.
No, I'm back here.
Okay.
It's misspelled. My last name's misspelled, and we couldn't fix it.
Oh,
It's
yes.
Arnaud. It's with an N,
Arnaud.
a G.
Okay.
But
Arnaud.
yeah,
Don't pronounce the T.
yeah, T
Gotcha.
style. Arnaud. Yeah.
So let's start with you, Irina. Really fascinating. I read a little bit about your background. You do sort of gallery kind of video largely,
Mhm. Yeah.
and really beautiful work. I stalked you a little bit. I looked at your stuff, and I was just like really taken with it. Really gorgeous, beautiful work. And you kind of did a departure on this because you made a narrative short. So, what made you want to make a narrative film?
Something I've been thinking about for a really long time. My work is experimental narrative, and I'm interested in character development and emotional relationships um and narrative in general. But my background is in fine art, and that's kind of world that I'm historically part of and
Mhm.
went to school for. And so it always seemed like a little bit out of reach or something I couldn't do. Um but it's something I always wanted to do. So I had an idea for a feature first, and then friends of mine who are in the industry were like, you should actually make a short. It's going to be much easier. And so these characters had been kind of kicking around in my head for a while. And obviously it's related to the art world. So it seemed like an easy next step to make a narrative, but within this world that I'm fairly familiar with.
Yeah, it's kind of meta, right? Because it's like a art film about artists. Um, and is it a proof of concept? Is this something that's part of
Yeah.
your narrative? Your feature length project?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, because it stands alone really beautifully. Do you want to give people a little synopsis without giving too much away because it is playing tonight?
Yeah. Well, the log line that I have is the characters' names are Helen and John. Helen and John are artists. They're also contract killers, and they hate the name Gary. And the movie's called Gary.
Really, really, really fun stuff. Stacey, you are a local celebrity in Tucson and maybe beyond Tucson, but I'm, you know, single focused on Tucson, I guess. But you've done a number of films here that were successful. I know you're an author, so you're also sort of as an author have stepped out of that to make films. Can you talk about what drove you to want to work in film? And welcome, David.
I made it.
Okay,
I'm in
great.
the Starbucks at Phoenix Airport. We're gonna see how the Phoenix Airport Wi-Fi holds up.
Okay. All right. So, Stacey, tell us about you sort of genre hopping from being writing to filmmaking.
Yeah, so I've had a long history in film production, television production. It's only in the recent few years, though, that I've really kind of gotten into narrative filmmaking. Uh, yeah, my biggest successes have been as a novelist. Uh, well, I don't know. Success is a tricky word. What does that really mean? Um, yeah, I started out, when I was a kid, 16 years old. My first job was at a movie theater many, many years ago, and I I joke that that was where I learned, oh, filmmaking it is a profession, it's a business. People at that time would actually go to movie theaters quite regularly and spend a not insignificant amount of money. And to an impressionable 16, 17, 18-year-old, seeing how different movies drew different audiences, and sometimes it wasn't exactly what the studios had expected. It wasn't, always what was marketed most heavily that drew audiences. All of that sort of was fascinating to me. So when I got to college, I majored in writing because I realized, well, at the core of this is a story. You have to be able to tell a story. And I think I was hopefully self-aware enough to realize that I didn't know how to tell a story very well at that age. And so it seemed like the lower risk way of telling the story, especially at that time period, so we're talking like mid 1990s, early 2000s, the less expensive way to kind of practice your craft was to write fiction and try to get that fiction out to readers and see if I could even tell a story that would resonate with people. I pursued that while also having a TV show in North Carolina for almost a decade. And so, yeah, I did a documentary film in 2013 that was a self-financed, self-produced documentary on a political issue in North Carolina at the time. And I screened that on local networks. I did a couple of like experimental narrative films that thankfully, hopefully, are nowhere to be found on the internet anymore. And yeah, the big breakthrough for me, and I say this every year at the Arizona International Film Festival, was meeting a director at the 2016 Arizona International Film Festival, Desmond Devenish, who had his feature-length film debut, Misfortune was the title of his film, premiere at the Arizona International Film Festival in 2016. Julio asked me to moderate a panel much like this. And at that time, I had a novel that Amazon had acquired the ebook and audiobook rights to, and they were marketing it heavily, and it became a bestseller. Amazon did not want the film rights. So I had the film rights, and so I was able to sell those film rights, and that film adaptation eventually got made and filmed in Cinecittà Studios in Rome, and some pickup in Guatemala. And it was for me, it was a transformational career changer. I had a few people tell me at that point, you need to start directing stuff yourself. So here I am a couple of years later with a couple of films that I feel a little bit more proud of under my belt, compared to some of that early stuff a decade or so ago. That's a long.
What about this film, Ava and Her Mother, which I just saw, which was lovely? Um, I know this is part of a series, right? This is the second installation.
Yeah, I think, I'd love to hear what David and Irina think about this next statement as well. But I think we live in an era now where the traditional forms and traditional ways that we get content out to audiences is completely up to the creator. And we're not bound by a 90-minute or 2-hour film format that has to be released through a theatrical window, nor have we been for at least a half decade or more. And so I'm experimenting with form. I started the Summer Haven series very much thinking like the writer that had, sold a lot of novels in me, thinking, okay, I'll do something just sort of low risk to start with. And so I filmed the pilot episode for Summer Haven, self-financed it for about $7,000, $8,000 back in 2022. It was 6 days of production, a couple of days of pickup for B-roll. And we threw that thing together remarkably fast compared to Ava and Her Mother. Ava and Her Mother, we were doing table readings for in 2023, right after the film festival, right after the Arizona International Film Festival. And we're still tinkering with the film to this day, although it did screen the other night. So 2 years later, this short film we filmed it more like, I think, on a schedule, probably more typical of like a feature-length film. But it is part of the series. I kind of view it as kind of an homage to Twilight Zone. If you like Stranger Things on a low budget, not a Netflix budget, but on a low budget, there's a wonderful Netflix series called Dark, which is a German-based production, which is phenomenal, that I'm inspired by. Again, those guys have tons of money. I don't, but it's kind of in that world where one episode sort of leads to the next, but at first you're sort of trying to figure it out sort of tangentially. Like how does this character connect to what we saw in the first one? And yeah, I'm excited to continue with it. It's a fun format, and ultimately it could be released. I think my plan is to release it on Amazon Prime as either a series or put it all together into one like 2 hour or 3 hour feature. Again, kind of experimenting with standard forms of time length and that sort of thing.
And David, I've been kind of asking everybody, people have jumped out of their usual genre, maybe of making art. And I know you won for Best Animation at this festival, didn't you? Was it last year?
The year before last year.
And so that was an animation film, and this film is live action and a narrative film. So tell us about, I don't know your background. Have you done a lot of animation, or have you always hopped around?
I'm definitely a hopper. And last year I also had a live action black comedy screen at Arizona International Film Festival. So it's my
Oh,
third year coming back, each
wow.
year a completely different genre than the last. I
Hmm.
love animation though. I did the animation kind of in COVID, which is great because you can direct animation in your pajamas.
Hmm.
So, it was kind of the perfect COVID production. But I've always loved live action. I love different genres. And with shorts, you really get to play around, I think. Um, my managers have constantly harangued me to pick a genre and stick to it, pick a lane and stick to it. Get yourself on a list, is what they say. Be the sci-fi guy or be I I'm a Chinese Jew. Like I don't conform to any category. I
You're
can't
all mixed
really
up.
stick in one box. So much to my manager's frustration and chagrin, I have gone all over the place. So yes, I'm a hopper.
Well, we're glad for it because your work is beautiful. So Coalescence, is this a proof of concept for a feature?
Yeah, it was originally conceived as a feature, and I had started writing the feature script, and it was just huge and chaotic and really interesting, but not something that I could get made at this stage. So I was like, let me shoot a proof of concept kind of short and really see if I can have these three different narratives that we braid together. So
Mhm.
partially a structural learning experience for me of how can I film these different scenes and get them all to weave together coherently, and then also show this concept of coalescence, which is the idea of merging consciousnesses together into a single mind.
And how do you arrive at scale? When you want to do something short, your film, I think, is around 8 minutes. And so how do you sort of figure out as you're conceptualizing what you're doing? Is this an 8-minute film? Does this need to be a 30-minute film? Like, is that difficult to do? I mean, do you
Mm,
look at do you look at conventional structure, like I'm going to do a 3-act short film structure, or what ingredients go into these decisions?
Part of it is practicality, which is not the sexy answer, but knowing that I'm going to be sending this to film festivals, easy to program something that's a little shorter, knowing that it's hopefully going to release online. It actually is going to release online July 14th on Dust's YouTube channel. There, I plugged it. Done.
Yeah.
Knowing that this is going to be seen on mobile phones and that this is going to be viewed online, and there's so much demand for attention from other media sources when you're scrolling through the internet. Time does play into it. My last short was 30 minutes. The rough cut of my last short was 45 minutes. I learned the hard way, like, hey, like you're asking for people to give a lot of time and attention. I like longer stuff, but for
Mhm.
something that was supposed to be kind of a punchy sci-fi proof of concept, I was like, let's make this as tight as we can make this, while still preserving the complexity of the structure and making it really interesting and visually appealing. And then the other part of it is we shot this over 2 days. We had like almost 70 setups, but we shot it in 2 days.
That's
So
unbelievable. Were they like 24-hour days?
uh no, we did 10-hour days. The way that I shot it, which I don't necessarily recommend if you can afford not to, but I storyboarded everything very specifically. I did an animatic, so I had every shot timed out. And I knew like this line, this one line, we're pushing in on this one line. So rather than run the whole scene, from start to finish. I'd tell the actors, just do this one line, and we'd push in, okay, we got that shot. Cool, now let's change setups. I don't recommend that because it's not so charitable to the actors to ask them to get into the moment for just one line, and they're already shooting out of sequence. I'd much rather have the time and flexibility to run through the scene from start to finish over and over and then chop it up later. But when shooting 70 or so setups in 2 days, you make these compromises. So
Efficient, but also like it must be scary because you're not giving yourself coverage for something that goes haywire or isn't working. You don't have that coverage to pull from either, right?
yeah, fuck
But
it.
you
Am I allowed to curse?
very meticulous, so you're not running into that issue. Maybe.
Yeah, again, with the storyboards and with the animatic, it was just so specific. Like I had timed everything out. I had timed it out to music. We ended up doing an original score after, but I had known where we were going to cut, how long each shot was going to be, more or less. But again, I don't recommend it if you can avoid it. But it was efficient, and yes, it is a little scary. But that's filmmaking. That's the fun of filmmaking. And we got our master shot. We got some coverage.
Give us a little quick 2-line synopsis of your film.
It's about two scientists who invent brain-to-brain interfacing technology to coalesce their minds into a single consciousness, and what happens to their identities as their memories collide. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was two
perfect.
sentences.
That's good.
Nailed it.
I want to say too that I'm knowing that you did this in 2 days. I know there was a ton of pre-production that you did to make that happen in 2 days, but the attention to detail in your film, like just the screens, there was like maybe 3 computer screens behind the actors, and the information you had on those screens, like it was so realistic, and so there was such attention to detail. The makeup, the special effects makeup was perfect. And your actors, and in all of these 3 films, the acting was really good. I mean, that's a little pet peeve of mine, that sometimes in short films, because we don't have a budget, whatever, we don't get the greatest performances. But all 3 of you got really, really amazing performances out of your actors. So let's move over to Stacey. Stacey, you had a really kind of talky film.
Yeah.
And it was very emotional. How did you get these performances? Did you rehearse this a lot? I mean, I know they were talented actors, but did you rehearse a lot?
Well, first, yeah, they're probably a couple of our best actors in Southern Arizona, in my opinion. And we have quite a bit of talent. Cindy Meyer, or Cynthia Meyer, she plays older Ava, or Ava's mother, as we think in the first part of the film. And she is the co-founder of the Rogue Theater in Tucson, which is probably one of our best community theaters in Southern Arizona. They've run the theater for 20 years. It's a block and a half from my house, so I'm a season ticket holder there. And Chelsea Bowdren plays Ava, and Chelsea is an ensemble performer at the Rogue. Both actors have over 20 years stage experience, and that's like seasonal stage experience where they're up there every show, essentially from fall to summer, on stage in front of 150 people, and they've been doing that for 20 years. And there's just a certain level of confidence that I think actors develop after doing their craft for that long, or even longer. I think Chelsea's actually been acting longer than that. So yeah, it starts with trying to get the best possible talent that I could. Cindy had not been in a whole lot of films, and she runs the theater, so I was triple blessed to have her in the film, knowing how busy she is. And so then, in terms of getting the performance out of them, we did a number of chemistry reads and table readings at the Rogue Theater. Part of the reason it's a little too talky for me, I don't want to poison the water, but as filmmakers, we tend to be our worst critics sometimes. was I was originally wondering, should I do this as like a stage production? Since I was working with stage actors. As we kind of got into it, though, I realized, no, this seems like I could turn it into the next Summer Haven film. So we did table readings, you know, at one of the best theaters in Tucson, and worked through the script, got feedback. We brought in small invited audiences for that, and got their feedback. Yeah, I mean, it was for a short film, it was an unusually long process towards production. We went through the script after we had a draft of the script. We were reading it, getting notes, reading it again, revising it for at least 6 months. That's after the script was done. And then I was storyboarding for about 3 or 4 months. Not every night, but every 2 or 3 nights, I'd go down to Time Market near my house and sit there and storyboard for a couple of hours and try to sketch out what I was picturing in my mind in the script, and sometimes what would sort of come to me while I was drawing. And then I'm working with our DP with the storyboards and getting his feedback. So yeah, it was a long process. So in a way, it was kind of cool because they got to rehearse. They knew the script really well. One practical piece of advice or thing I learned, not necessarily advice, but one thing I learned, and I could be wrong on this, so if Cindy or Chelsea or somebody knows that, you know, that might know better than me, can correct me on this, I'd be happy to hear it. But we filmed one of the pivotal scenes. We filmed a couple of the pivotal scenes actually up on the mountain north of Tucson at 8,000 feet. And I think Chelsea and Cindy drove up together. I think they were in a car together and rode up together. The crew went up, you know, and sort of piecemeal. And I bet they were running lines the whole time they were driving up the mountain, knowing.
And that's like an hour drive.
Yeah. So when they got on set, now I'm speculating. I haven't actually asked them this, but I've kind of filed that away as, oh, if I do another kind of really long, intense emotional dialogue scene, I should see if my actors can ride in a car together to the set and make that set like, you know, an hour away from wherever they're, you know, meeting. And maybe they'll run lines, and then, you know, they feel that much more confident when they're on set.
Well, it paid off. They gave great performances.
Thank you for that.
Irina, your film was just incredibly well acted, very believable. I totally was like, these people have to be artists. They have to be artists. They were so believable as like New York artists. So tell me about your process of getting these performances.
Yeah, they did really kind of embody that New York cool. It's also shot in Montana, I should know.
Yeah, yeah.
They're New York artists who go to Montana to do their contract killing. So they have this kind of like out of place but like too cool vibe about them. And they're also making art while they're out there.
I love it. Yeah.
The casting process, you know, I did have a casting director, Robert Murray, and he helped me find the guy who plays John, was played by Mark Junick. And then the woman who plays Helen, Marin Lord, she came to me in a very kind of roundabout, kind of magical, you know, someone out there is listening to me way. We did look for a lot of people with Robert, and there are so many talented people. And also, you know, this is my first time really casting in this way, so I really felt so creepy, like watching these tapes of these incredible women, you know, saying these lines and me like, gosh, she's just too, you know, something that just, I felt awful because they were also great, you know, but it just, there's something, right, that isn't being like, isn't coming through. And this character, Helen, she's really, in one of the scenes in the film, is really the one that's selling the fact that they are contract killers, you know, because you kind of, you know about it. There's no murder that takes place in the film, but you know that they're contract killers. And then there's a scene where it's like, oh, okay, wow, they really are these people, you know, and she's the one that's selling it. And I really needed a character who, an actor who could go to this really ugly place and be obviously not physically ugly, but embody a kind of ugliness that without being aware, without being self-conscious about it, you know? And I really just prayed for this person because otherwise it didn't work for me. And there was also something important to me about that, the woman in the relationship being that person, and rather than the man, which is maybe something we're more used to in this type of genre.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll make this really long story short, but basically I was out in a totally different neighborhood in New York than I normally was at, and we met an actor. And at that point, this is like 3 weeks before the shoot or a month before the shoot, and I was like, "Oh, I'm making a movie. Do you know anybody?" Da-da-da. And she was like, "Well, send me the script." And so I sent her the script, and she recommended Marin, essentially. But it was like I had never met this person before. I just happened to meet her in the street in this extremely random way. And then I saw Marin, and I saw her reel, and I knew that she was perfect for it. And we didn't have any time to rehearse. In fact, Marin's plane was delayed by a day. So she came day one, scene one, like after we finished some B-roll essentially, because we were waiting for her. And she came on, and the actors actually ended up knowing a bunch of people in common, and they just had great rapport, which is, thank God, they have a lot of really great chemistry.
Yeah, I was gonna say they did have amazing chemistry. They were quite believable as a couple.
Yeah, they had great chemistry, and they also, you know, being in New York, they also at that time were each in a relationship with artists. So I think they understood that world, even though they weren't necessarily, they are professional actors, they're in the acting world, but they have had firsthand experience in this kind of like too cool New York City art scene. So they definitely brought that to it for sure.
Yeah, they were great. And yeah, she was great. Like her rage scene was very believable. It had that ugliness, but like you said, she was not self-conscious in it. And
Yeah.
he was like nonplussed. It was it was great.
Yeah, he's like watching her, so like, I love her so much.
Yeah.
She's the best, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
threatening this guy on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience. Let's see, for everyone. When you have an idea, do you just run through it, or do you think of it in moments that all get placed together as they come together? Like, do you typically write ABC, or is it more like DBAF? Yeah, so I think they're wondering if you have like master images or scenes that just come to your mind, and then you kind of figure out, how am I going to sew these together? Anybody have any thoughts?
I'll go first. I'll go first, just for
Yeah.
this film. Um, this story, not the contract killing part, but the rest of it is based on something that happened to me and my husband. So there was this kind of, which Juliana, since you've seen it, you kind of know the whole thing. So that arc is something I already had to work with. Obviously, not every single moment is told in this film, and I've made some, you know, creative changes to suit these characters and their role as, or their jobs as murderers. But so in that regard, the beginning, middle, end was kind of, it came prefab in a way. But there were other scenes, and I'm also in a writers group, so I did end up revising the script a lot, which was really helpful in this writers group. And there are definitely things I put in that then I ended up cutting, and of course there are things I cut after I was editing the film. But just for this piece alone, it really was kind of like ABC, as this person is asking.
You knew the arc, you knew the story you were going to tell.
Yeah, it was more a factor of, how do I put in these moments to tell, so that people know what they do for this illicit, illegal job that they do on the side to earn money. Because really their first priority in life is making art.
Well, it's a great way to fund art. I'm going to think about it now.
Yeah, really.
It's not cheap to make a
These
film.
times.
Desperate times.
Yeah.
So, David, your project feels like it was a thought experiment that you developed into a narrative, but that's just me. Tell me about your process.
Uh, thought experiment that developed into a narrative. Yeah, yeah, it's a thought it was almost actually, I think, a feeling that turned into a thought experiment that turned into a narrative. And I think the feeling twofold. When you're falling in love with someone, there's this desire to connect. Oh, I want to know everything about you. I want to share everything about myself with you. And then if you're like me, I don't know, maybe I need therapy, but I think there's kind of this also fear of being consumed or losing your independence. Like, oh, like, am I going to be lost in this relationship somehow? Um, and then that turned into this thought experiment of like, well, that feeling of wanting to connect or that fear of losing yourself, what would happen if you could take that extreme and take that literally? Like, literally, you can connect your mind with someone, and literally, they could take over your mind. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, how do we develop a film narrative? And my answer to the asker's question is sort of both. The way I write is very ABC, even though the structure of this film is nonlinear. I write it out as if I were watching it, but the actual scenes are kind of jumbled up. In this film in particular, there's 3 moments in time that braid together. So it is a bit of DBA and a bit of ABC as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're not necessarily, you're not telling a linear story, but you have developed a narrative that has a beginning, middle, and end, or 3 different narratives that are worked together.
Yeah.
Stacey, what about you?
Yeah, it's a great question. First, thanks for whoever asked it. Thanks for tuning in and asking such a thoughtful question. There were, I'll use a kind of an experience to sort of describe my process as a writer, especially a writer of films, in which I'd make a distinction between writing novels and short stories and writing a script. And even writing a script, I make a distinction in my mind. If I'm writing a script to film myself, in contrast to, say, Eddie and Sonny, which I was writing that script and someone else was going to direct and they were going to pay me for it, I write them very differently. So it really depends on who the audience is for the script or the story and what the purpose is. And if it's, like I said, if it's something I'm directing, which it sounds like maybe that's where the question is kind of coming from, I'll just take it in that direction. So last summer, I think it was, maybe it was 2 summers ago, I was at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and there's a wonderful gallery where they have impressionist painters. There's Van Gogh there, there's a Cezanne, there's like 4 Monets in this one gallery. And the oldest Monet that they had is a representational piece, and it's a fruit bowl. It's a bowl with fruit. And it looks nothing like the impressionist paintings that you see later in his career. And next to that representational bowl of fruit, which is brilliantly done. I mean, it's a Monet. He was an absolutely brilliant artist, even in his 20s. You could see the craftsmanship and the attention to detail. By his 30s and into his 40s, everything starts blurring. Like the canvases, the impressionism that we come to associate with Monet, it becomes more evident in his 30s and 40s, and of course, much later in his life as well. And when I saw these paintings side by side by side, I recognized I had this moment where I realized, okay, I don't want to try to represent reality in a film. I don't think I'm interested in that anymore. I did that. I did a documentary work. I did a TV show, which was basically interviewing like this. And, I've done all that. I think if I'm writing fiction, it's going to be some weird mixture of abstract, impressionistic feelings, to use the word David said a moment ago. It's about how I feel. And I'm going to start with that. So the feeling that Ava and Her Mother started with was seeing my wife and our daughter connecting in a way that was very unique to a mother and daughter, and recognizing that's different than how I connect with my daughter. And I grew up as a kid myself with two older brothers, so I didn't have a sister in our household. So I didn't have the experience of seeing how parents relate to different genders and even non-binary kids for that matter. And so it started with that. I was like, whoa, okay, Susan's relationship with Harper is very different than how I relate to Harper, our daughter. And so I started doing some research and exploring mother-daughter relationships. And one of the things that I found when I was doing a lot of the research is, and interviewing. I actually did a bunch of interviews. Now that I think about it, 2 years ago, I did about a dozen interviews with people who volunteered to talk with me about their women who volunteered to talk with me about their relationships with their mothers. And one of the things that I kind of came away from all that experience with was an understanding that often the conflict between a mother and a daughter emerges because a mother has an expectation that a daughter will adopt at least some of the values that the mother has. And some of this stuff is done at a non-conscious level. I don't even think people consciously say, well, why is my daughter's political views slightly different or life choices different? But what researchers have shown is that mothers do that not because they're necessarily like fundamentally like judgmental or something, but it's that they want their daughters to represent, or they're sort of projecting how they feel. Well, how should I say this? They want their daughters to kind of adopt their views to uphold their own identity as a woman and as a mother, especially in like traditional like cultures or collectivist cultures. You see this much more commonly. The U.S. is kind of is a mixed bag because it's such an independent culture, and we're a little bit further advanced than some other cultures around the world. Not that we don't have a lot of room to grow for sure, but so it started with that. So I was like, okay, so what's the conflict between this mother and daughter, and what is the core of it really all about? And it's only later in the film that we realize that both of them have suffered a trauma, right? And then it became kind of a metaphor for women who have been raped. And that the pain and the psychological suffering that they both endured and that they are projecting and trying to overcome in their conflict with one another is a result of this father who was so abusive. And so I think that's kind of where it all started, right? Was this very abstract way of kind of doing it, or of writing the story, and then sort of seeing, okay, I'm going to do some research, do some interviews, pull together some data, see what researchers have actually said. But then finally, and I'll shut up after this, I tend to be very someone to the flummoxing my crew and cast. I'll be working on a script, even though I did all that work, did the interviews, did the script, storyboarded. I'll continue to work on a script even after we're wrapped with production. Like production's done, and I'm still going back and tweaking the script. And when we're on set, I'm like tweaking the script. So I tend to be so far I've been one of those kind of directors, which might be mean that I'm difficult to work with. I don't know, but yeah, I haven't. Again, if I'm directing it, it's one thing. If I'm selling the script and it's somebody else's baby, then they can run with it and do whatever they want to do with it. But if I'm directing it, I'm probably going to be working on that script as we're shooting. I might be making changes to, oh, this needs to go a different way. And so I need actors that are very flexible. I am not a cinematic director. I am hopefully an actor's director. I love connecting with actors and bringing out the best emotions in them, and trust the technical stuff to the technical experts on set. That's a long answer.
But very appreciated. So switching gears a little bit, not to get too personal, but it's hard to fund a short film. It's hard to make a short film. Even when you get some funding, it's usually not nearly enough. How has that process been? Are you going to do it again? Anybody can go ahead and go.
I will bankrupt myself doing this for sure.
You're one of those directors.
No, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, and I'm not afraid to, I'm not too self-conscious to put out budgets because they're not very big budgets. Eddie and Sunny, again, that was kind of a weird one because it was based on a novel of mine. I wrote the screenplay, I got paid for it, I got paid for the intellectual rights. That film was filmed on a $3.5 million production budget, something in that neighborhood. And then the talent budget was probably about a third of that or less. So that was kind of an unusual circumstance, but one that I hope to duplicate again in my career, knock on wood, at some point, right? If I'm self-financing a film that I'm filming in Tucson, that's going to look different. If I'm filming in LA, that's going to look different. The expectations are going to be different. So yeah, the pilot for Summer Haven was about $7 grand, $8 grand, 5 days of production. So we were 5 or 6 days of production. So we were about $1,000 per day, somewhere in that ballpark. Ava and Her Mother, which is about 3 times as long, is going to be coming in closer to $15,000 to $20,000 when we're done. And all that came out of my own pocket. So we'll see. I've got a 24-page script. It's the next episode in Summer Haven that I'm excited to get behind. But I kind of want to go out and get some money for this one because I think it's a little bit better script all around. So we'll see. I'm very interested in learning more about your casting director, Irina.
Yeah, so Irina, how did you fund your film?
This movie cost me so much money. It was crazy when I saw the final number. I was like, oh my gosh. I did fundraising for it through just like my, everyone that I know, which was extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I just was like, well, I guess this is what it is. I have to be uncomfortable. And I got used to it. But, that first ask is, that it was really hard. But so I raised probably a third of the budget that way, and then I paid for the rest myself. I did, I live in New York and I shot it out in Montana, so that definitely added a lot to the budget. I flew a bunch of people out, from New York. Not everybody. Many, most of the crew is from Montana, but so it pays off because I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film, and I'm,
Beautiful shot
I
film.
had that experience, and again, this is my first narrative, so go big or go home, whatever that cliche is. But I definitely will not be replicating that again. I mean, I literally can't afford that. And so thinking about future films, like, okay, what can I shoot in 2 days? What can I shoot in 3 days? What can I shoot upstate in this house that I have available to me for free? And like all of these things, and how can I keep everything kind of smaller but still tell a big story, because there is Montana really serves as this incredible background that makes this film seem so big. And I think that really helps just create the atmosphere of this story. So how to just thinking creatively in the future. I don't have anything in the works for the future right now, but I definitely, sadly, I'm not a multimillionaire who can simply just throw thousands of dollars at my own productions. And I have a family, and it's extremely irresponsible to just take money out of my child's mouth and make films with it. So
They'll be fine. They'll figure it out.
well, I mean, what is the future going to even look like? So who knows?
Yeah.
Is it going to be college? We don't know.
We don't know. So make it with the college fund.
Yeah, but it was really a lot of money. Like it was like $45,000. So
wow.
It was a lot of money. Yeah.
It shows. I mean, it's the production values are amazing. It's a gorgeous film. I mean, it looks expensive in the best possible ways. So you know, and as a proof of concept, maybe it will pay off in
Yeah,
the,
maybe.
but I like the idea, like we were talking about, like working within your constraints and thinking about like what do I have access to. I kind of like that creatively because and maybe you all could speak to that after David talks about money, but is like, you know, sometimes you throw these few ingredients in the pot and you come up with something you wouldn't have come up with when you could pull from everything. It's a lot, you know. So I like the idea of working with constraints. I think it's sort of a creative challenge to put that puzzle together. But David, how did you fund your film?
I self-funded it. I have a pretty weird, unconventional career path, or multiple career paths. I like to describe myself as vocationally schizophrenic. Um, the story is that out of college, I got a job working as a bar back at a ping pong bar club called Spin, and I was dreaming of being a filmmaker. I'd made some, really dumb student films in college, and everyone I talked to in the entertainment industry said three things: one, go to LA; two, become an assistant; three, eventually you can hand your script to someone and maybe they'll like it and you can break in. So I, at 23 years old, being from New York City, didn't have a driver's license, learned how to drive, drove cross country to LA, got one speeding ticket, and had my car trapped in a sand trap. Had to get pulled out, but I made it to LA, and I got jobs working as a production assistant on indie film sets and commercials. And after about like a year of that, just doing the 10 to 12 hour days, stocking coolers with Gatorade and taking out the trash and so on, um, yeah, I just kind of felt stuck. And I decided to quit and just take a massive risk. At the time, cryptocurrency was really booming. And I had gotten super interested in it because I'd found out about it when I was working at the bar. These two guys were at the bar just talking about Ethereum and stuff. And I was just curious, and they were super passionate about what they were talking about. So I was just eavesdropping. And then eventually started asking some questions. So I'd like known about cryptocurrency for a little bit. And after quitting production assistant work, I had taken like a couple $1,000 and done really well investing. And I was like, screw it, I'm gonna launch my own cryptocurrency investment fund, and then I'll use that fund in order to build relationships in Hollywood, so I can like kill two birds, one stone. Um, and most people thought I was crazy. My pitch to everybody was, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know more than anyone you know, and these crypto markets move really fast. So if you want to get in, you should get in now, and I'm probably your best bet. Most people said no, but I got coffee with this really big Hollywood director who went to my university, and his email was for some reason in our directory. I don't know how he's not just constantly bombarded with emails. We just hit it off, and he was impressed enough with me to give me a substantial investment that I managed to more than quadruple over the past few years. And in 2021, things in the crypto market really went crazy. And I decided, okay, cool, I'm going to start liquidating, a portion of the fund and finance my own shorts. So over the past 3 years, I've done 3 short films that have all been self-financed by this crypto fund. And this year, I'm just like totally closing down the fund. I structured the fund in a way where like I don't make any profit unless I realize a gain for my investors, which is like part of how I incentivize them to trust me when I was 24 years old to like go do this. I gave them favorable terms. I was like, all right, I'm not going to take a management fee, and I won't take any profit fee until we realize things. Um, anyway, so yeah, this year I'm like closing down the fund and just collecting all the gains that I have, some of which I've been sitting on since 2017, and going to shoot my first feature film this year. So if there's a takeaway from this, it's like, if there's some other external way you can get money to route into the passion, that it's very hard to monetize creativity. If you could do that, do that. Um, yeah. So I just took a huge gamble that managed to mostly pay off. It was a bumpy ride, don't get me wrong, but yeah.
Well, it's fascinating because most artists really don't have brains for business. And, you know, that's amazing that you are gifted in both areas. I'm very, very impressed.
I actually think, and if it's all interesting to anyone listening, the the mind for narrative actually was partially what made me a decent investor. because when you're investing in a story that hasn't unfolded yet. So it's a
Interesting.
lot of it's just like collective psychology. Like when you're looking at the line that dictates the price of an asset, that's really just thousands, potentially millions of people's thoughts coming together in a market form, deciding that something's a good idea if it's going up or a bad idea if it's going down. When you're betting on a company, it's a team of players, those are your characters, and they have an idea, that's your concept, and you're betting on that journey that they're going to go on. So I think a lot of, I mean, that if anything, that gave me an edge because most of the people in finance are coming in with MBAs, and I'm coming in with I dropped out of my MFA program, but coming from the arts point of view. And I think bringing in that sort of narrative perspective actually helped me see things that maybe someone who's purely thinking about the economics wouldn't see.
Mhm.
And I also got a little bit lucky. Like I don't want to downplay. There's some chance that's involved, and so yeah. But I think it's I don't think eschewing the business side of things, necessarily does artists any favors. So it's like if you can do both, like great.
Yeah, no, I just am very bad at it personally, and I'm repelled by it, so it's makes it difficult. But
Fair.
fortune favors the bold, as they say. And that was like a brilliant thing that you did. Very cool story. We have another question. How important a role does the score play in your film? And let's not be too long because I think the Zoom's going to cut us off in 7 minutes. And I just want to get some wrapping up thoughts from you all as well. So anybody want to talk about music and score?
I'll go first just to say I didn't have a score
Okay.
intentionally. At the very end, I have a song.
Yeah. David?
Sorry, I was like typing an answer to the Q&A box here. Someone asked me about if Spin is owned by Susan Sarandon. It is. She didn't give me any advice. I only met her once, and I don't have any plans to make a film about my epic road trip to LA. But my future film that I'm doing in August is semi-autobiographical. Anyway, as for the music question, sorry, it was what role does the music play in the composition play?
Yeah, how important is your score in your film?
Super important. I've worked with the same composer on every film, Dan Light, who's brilliant. He's so good at taking, kind of maybe a concept and turning that into actual music. Um, so yeah, it's super important. I have temp music that I kind of write to, and when I did the animatic, I timed out the cuts of the storyboards to some temp music, and then when I was on set, we played music for the actors at various points. And then all of that temp music that's part of the process of making the thing becomes a good reference for the composer. And I talk to the composer as I'm writing this stuff, and he sends me references. So it's super important, super important.
Yeah, I like to have music that I work with when I'm in the earliest stages of editing and conceptualizing something. It just pulls ideas out of me somehow. So yeah, I feel that. What about you, Stacey?
It's super important. The things that I've learned, I've worked with two different composers on two different episodes of Summer Haven now. One was based in Sardinia. He was actually the composer for Eddie and Sonny as well. That's how I met him. He was phenomenal. This is what he does for a living. He scores TV shows and movies. I chose to work with a different composer on Ava and Her Mother because I wanted to bring it more local. I would totally work with Stefano Guzzetti again in Sardinia, and we're friends to this day. So I might work with him again. But I wanted to work with somebody that I could actually sit in the room with them in post-production and throw around some ideas. I think David's suggestions are brilliant and ones I want to try to put into practice in future films. Specifically, having some ideas before production even begins, or at the very least, having something that you can give to your actors to help them see the mood that you're going for. And music is a wonderful language for that. So it's hugely important. I'm still growing as a filmmaker, so I'll, who knows, maybe I'll work with a different composer on a new movie because I'm trying to figure out like what my team really is. What is our team ultimately going to be? And so I'm open. I'm open to suggestions. I love the two composers I've worked with so far. I'd work with them again. I would recommend them.
What's your next project, Stacey? Just very, very quickly, because we have 3 minutes for everybody.
Yeah, so super quick. One, I've got a short story anthology series with Summer Haven that I'm getting short stories in from writers. And I want to launch that as an ebook and audiobook jointly with the film series online. All of this is going to be self-distributed through Amazon. So that's the big thing on the horizon. I want to get Ava and Her Mother out to audiences. I'll probably send it out to a few more film festivals. We'll see. Mainly, I want to get it in front of paying audiences and really see how they respond. That's a very different audience than a film festival audience. They can be a lot harder on a film, quite frankly. And so
I want to also remind people before we get cut off that David and Irina's films are playing tonight at 10 o'clock in our shorts program. And I know, David, you'll be here. Irina, are you here in town? Oh, wonderful. Okay, hopefully I'll meet you both in person. And so, yeah, the filmmakers will be on hand for Q&A there as well if you have questions that did not get in. We're getting bumped off soon, but Irina, what's next for you?
I'm revising my script for the feature version of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out how that gets made, and maybe I'll ask you guys because I have no idea.
David, what do you got going on?
Crypto.
David's gonna
I'm
advise
in.
us all in the stock market now that things are crazy. But go
Yeah,
ahead, David.
well, things are pretty ridiculous right now. Who knows what's going to happen? But I am in production on an animated short called The Cat and the Bird, and I am set to shoot my first feature film. It's live action kind of character driven drama in August. So that goes slated. It's gonna be a busy year.
Very exciting. Y'all, thank you so much for being here and your thoughtful answers and the beautiful work that you do. I know how hard it is, how expensive it is, how crazy it is to put yourself out there with this work. And just we need your art more than ever right now. So thank you again. And I hope I will see you all at the screening room tonight. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.